Okay. I'm here with Timothy Kenny. He is a productivity expert. He is a prolific online course creator. And I wanted to have Timothy on to talk about productivity and course creation, just because he's in a kind of similar field as me, which is knowledge management, accelerated learning, all these kinds of things using digital tools. And I know that many of you in my audience are interested in creating your own online courses. And I know I've shared, my experience, but it's great to have other examples as well. So thank you for being on, Timothy. And could you start with just telling us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, Tiago, thanks for having me. My background started in terms of everything. It really goes back to I have four younger brothers, and I've always been teaching them. And I think the skill of teaching is having a real good understanding of who you're teaching, who you're communicating with, so that nothing, I think about it like building a house. You have to understand the terrain and the foundation, and everything needs to be built on something solid. And so much of teaching is just building on stuff. Or not really understanding what the student knows and what they don't know. And then you have this unstable house built on top. So that goes back to the beginning. And then when I was roughly 21 years old, I wrote a book called Accelerated Learning for Entrepreneurs.
Huh.
And that book, yeah. So that it never really did anything. It's still up on Amazon. It's got like a couple of reviews. But that was sort of my distillation at that point in time of my understanding of accelerated learning. And soon after publishing that book through CreateSpace, I won a scholarship to this high-end business conference, and I was like one of these young scholars or something. So I met a couple mentors there, and I got invited on the last night to one of the guys. It was a bunch of high rollers. We went out to this steak place, and then after that, we stayed out till 3 or 4 a.m. We were at the cigar bar in Washington, D.C., drinking Pappy Van Winkle and cigars and everything. And at the end of it, they asked me, so what are you all about? And I told them, I gave them the spiel on my book. And they said, yeah, you can be successful with that. Just go do it. So that was then. And I did a little bit of teaching in person. I did back when Skillshare taught in-person classes. I did some of that. I did some public speaking in a few places, and then got a website going, started creating some courses, and then went on Udemy. And then for the past three or 4 years, I've been on Udemy and creating stuff on accelerated learning, my Learning the Hard Way course series, which is now called Endgame, Mastering Planning, Mastering Organization. Those are three of my big courses, and a smattering of other things.
Interesting. And are you doing this? So, okay, let me ask, what was the jump? What prompted the jump from, it sounds like you did a lot of in-person things, the
Yep.
Skillshare in-person courses, public speaking. What was the impetus to move it online?
What was the impetus to move online? Well, I always knew online is going to scale much better. I should go back. One of my key inspirations in high school was the 4-Hour Work Week. So that was really hot back then. And it's still a really good book. And that was sort of my blueprint. I was thinking, should I go to college? I was even considering dropping out of high school at the time. And there was this vision of you can start a business out of your laptop. You can be anywhere you want. You have passive income. So that led to, well, I didn't know what I wanted to do as a business, but I knew I had to know how to run a business. So I started teaching myself business. I realized I wasn't retaining anything from these books. And so I went on it. I thought it was going to be a month. I thought I was just going to figure out accelerated learning in a month, figure out speed reading memorization, and then come back to learning business. It turns out as I'm going through all these courses and books and stuff, and the same thing, it's most of the stuff out there is not good. Most of these magic pill, like, oh, you're going to read 1,000 words per minute, you're going to memorize decks of, it's all removed from real learning, trying to improve yourself as a knowledge worker or however you think about it. So I was like, wow, this is my idea. Nobody's doing this well. my summarization of all this stuff is going to be better than most of the stuff out there. So that was the light bulb moment where I thought, wow, here's my thing. And then you go back to Tim Ferriss, the minimum viable product. You put something out there and then you try to get validation. You see if you get traction. And then if you do, you go from there. So in person was just the easier thing to do. I didn't even know about Udemy while I was doing Skillshare. And I'm not sure exactly when they got started, but Skillshare had a key person in Boston, Peter Boyce, who's now in venture capital. And he had a relationship. He was going to Harvard. I was going to Tufts. And we saw each other a couple times. And so there might have been something there, but they had some groundwork there. And then they later moved to online only. But I knew from the start, if you want to scale, you go online. And I mean, that's where the future is. You go from plays in a theater to movies in theaters all around the country. So I always saw that tipping point.
Interesting. And what was when you first got started on Udemy, actually, let's hold off on that. I want to know a little bit more about accelerated learning. Why? So you said it was removed from sort of real life.
Right.
What do you mean by that? Say more about what you saw as the flaws in the existing material about accelerated learning.
Yeah. So at the beginning, and this is the rudimentary model in my first book, was there's speed reading, there's note take. You sort of read the book, you take your notes, and then you memorize that. But there's problems with each of those steps, especially speed reading, memorization. So most people who hear accelerated learning or never heard about it think, oh, speed reading, I'm going to read really fast and then I'm good. The problem is you're not going to remember any of that stuff after a week. So it doesn't really matter how fast you read. So that's the first problem. The second problem that comes in later is if you're not annotating what you read, then how are you getting that into notes? You have to be taking notes as you're reading or as you're watching that course or as you're listening to that podcast, or else you're gonna have to go and listen to it again. So there's those two key problems. Speed reading is good for previewing stuff, and you scroll through the PDF or you flip through the book or you click through the videos of the course to get a sense. But beyond that, you can only annotate at about 100, 150 words per minute. So most people don't need to read any faster in order to max out their annotation speed. And that's the key for speed reading. So the problem with note-taking, which isn't as interesting, but if you can visualize concepts and show the relationships as geometrical patterns, that's going to make things more understandable. So mind maps got popular, I think, in the 90s, Tony Buzan, but flow charts, org charts or taxonomies, other stuff like that can be really useful. And then for memorization, you have all this stuff out there about memorize serial numbers or digits of pi or decks of cards. And the key problem there is people don't understand visual mnemonics. And what they don't understand is that you're actually, to store this information, it needs to be translated into a new language of pictures. So you have to, number one, there has to be an existing language or lexicon out there, which really doesn't exist right now. You have to Google image search each thing, each idea, each word you want to memorize. And then you need to connect those together into a memory palace. Where do you get that memory palace? You have to create it from nothing. So that's in its very, very early stages. And I think some things with virtual reality may change that, but it's still very rudimentary. And the way people memorize cards or numbers is you have a very limited vocabulary. Your vocabulary is 10 digits or it's 52 cards. And so, yeah, it's going to be a lot easier if you're speaking a language with 50 words in it. But the reality is, like, if you want to learn medical school concepts, like, you would have to invent a new image or set of images for each word, each idea. And that's incredibly time consuming. And it ends up not even being worth it in a lot of cases. So until we get to the point where there's an established language of images, and emojis and other things are starting to do that. And I think that's going to grow. But until we have standardized lexicon or dictionary, and then also standardized off-the-shelf memory palaces, we're going to be in this very early stage. And one example, if you want to see it done right, is Sketchy Notes. And they make stuff for nursing students learning pharmacology, or medical students learning that. That's a good example of it done right. But you can see the hundreds or thousands of hours that it took for somebody or a team of artists to create those resources. So for you to create that just for yourself, never share it, throw it away once you're done with it, it doesn't make any sense. And in the real world, nobody's actually using these strategies to learn stuff in an efficient way. So, or practically nobody. So there's some real problems with that.
Who are the people that tend to take your courses? Are they medical students, other people in school, or what's the usual profile?
I don't get a lot of information because it's through Udemy. There's limits as to, you really can't get information. They don't want that. Spammers, if you give them an opportunity, they're going to use it. And so they've really cut down on what information you're allowed to have or ask for. And so I don't know that much about them, but it's a combination of students, just professionals, entrepreneurs, people who want to start a side business. It's, I'd say it's a pretty good, one of the interesting things is that most of them aren't from the United States. So I think 70 or 80% of them are outside the United States. And that's been a big impact on me, getting me to broaden my horizons and make sure when I'm communicating, a lot of people, English may not be their first language. And a lot of them speak multiple languages. So there's that factor.
Interesting. What's the range of price points that you use?
So Udemy there's a list price and then there's the discount. And the discounts are usually between $10 and $20. So for most of my courses, you're buying it at a discount, and it's somewhere between $10 and $20. I do have a few courses that are at the higher end, and then I have some coaching and other things that I'm working on that are obviously higher than that. But that's pretty much the Udemy model. And then that breaks down in terms of what I get out of that. It's, if Udemy brings the student to me, then we split it 50-50. If there's some affiliate, like let's say they go through your site, you're an affiliate, they come to Udemy and buy a course, you get 50% of that. I get 25, Udemy gets 25. So that's, and then if I bring them or they use a coupon that I give, then I get 97%, and then there's 3% credit card fee. So that's pretty much how the Udemy game works.
Interesting. And you said that it kind of relies on launches, like you have to have new courses coming out.
It's sort of weird. You do obviously get a bump with launches, and when you have a ton of students like I do, that really helps. But when you're just getting started, it can be difficult to get traction if you don't have your own website. So that's why Udemy's been so good for me, is when I started out, I didn't have any online presence. I didn't have an email list. I didn't have like a I mean, I had very basic things, but they weren't getting any traction. So Udemy was great for me because it gave me a storefront where there were just, I think they hit 30 million students on Udemy a month or two ago. So there's just tons of people on there. And so you don't, in a sense, you don't have to do a lot of marketing work. Like I don't have anything on my website. I don't have a blog. So it's a different model, but I don't enjoy doing a lot of that marketing stuff. And so, and it's also given me the validation of people will buy my courses, people find me credible, those sort of basic things. And, but yeah, you do. But with launches, Udemy has cyclical sales. And so they bring in people and somehow they find you. They're searching for something, you show up. And so like I've had courses that were on the front page of the productivity section of Udemy. And
Nice.
right now I'm the number one instructor in the productivity section of Udemy. So people find me and certain things rank high, like my project management course is ranking pretty good. My planning and note, it's funny, my planning and my organization courses have done better in the rankings than my accelerated learning. And I think it's just because more people are looking for it.
Yeah.
So the dynamics are somewhat different from selling stuff through your site because uh, it's sort of like the Amazon of online courses or the Netflix or whatever.
How so?
Because you can put something up there, and if somebody searches for that, a keyword that's in your course or in your title, you're going to pop up, and you're also going to pop up as recommended. So other people's courses will pop up on my course page as, hey, if you're interested in this, you might be interested in this. And I show up in other people's. So there's more cross pollination, whereas other people teaching the same stuff often won't be on that somebody's website.
Ah, okay.
So there's more cross pollination. Like Amazon has suggested products, Netflix has suggested TV shows or movies. So they
Right.
try to make things up, and yeah.
So you're really looking at the discovery engine that Udemy has for most of your students. That's how most of them come to you.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much all of them.
Wow, interesting. That's so interesting because my blog is like my front door. Like
Yeah,
everyone comes through the blog. I can't imagine, but I guess that's because I'm using Teachable, where they're not bringing me any students virtually. It's all through my efforts.
yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if both models continue or how it all works. But it is a very different model, and you do give up a lot of control. So, um, and you really can't set a price. The way it works is like people are used to paying a certain amount. It's like being a musician. Your album has to cost between $10 and $20. Your book, if you're going for a popular audience, it has to be 20 to 30, $10 to $30.
Yes.
So you don't get to really differentiate on price. And so I think there are going to be certain things because of the value and because of how few people take it. It won't fit into the pricing scheme on Udemy, which is anywhere from I think $20 to $200 is their price range, allowable price range, in $5 increments. So there always will be a place for doing stuff independent. It's just a question of, I guess, discovery and how that's going to change.
Have you thought about it? Have you thought of setting up your own platform, your own storefront?
Yeah, I'm actually in the process of doing that. And doing this interview, I mean, I really haven't done other interviews like this. So this is my first interview unless you go back a long time. And it sort of spurred me to get some of my website stuff fixed. And I put together, once I hit, I think, yeah, good.
Oh no, go ahead, finish.
Oh, once I hit about 70 or 80 courses, people kept on asking me, what should I take first? Like, how are all these fit together? So I created a free course that takes people through, but I just printed out the pages of my Udemy profile and went through and circled stuff with a pen. And I've turned that into a Google Slides presentation on my homepage. And now you can see, and there's also a spreadsheet. Like one of my coaching clients, he showed me a spreadsheet he had his assistant create for him of like all my courses. And like, this was something that was almost as good as what I had internally.
Oh
And I
my
was like,
gosh.
he was trying to figure out like which courses to take. So I just created that like over the last week since you emailed me, and I should have done it a lot sooner, but I like learning stuff, and then the course is sort of what I do at the end as sort of a milestone. So
Yes.
I just never feel like doing the website. And, people just come through Udemy and I don't do anything. So it's very easy to get comfortable and just
Yeah.
not work on the other things.
And what's the motivation to do your own? Are you using Teachable, or what's the new one?
Uh, I'm not sure what like backend platform I'm going to use to host them. Um, so I haven't gotten that far, but Teachable is one of like I would say most people are using that now.
Yeah.
So that's probably what I would use. But there are, I think if you want to have a discussion forum or something, I'm not sure how they do that. So I'll have to look into that.
And what's the motivation? Are you creating like a premium course, or you just want to reduce dependence on Udemy? What's the motivation for the new one?
To fund certain projects, I'm going to need to charge more for the courses, or I'm going to have to massively increase the amount of people coming to my courses. So, and it's probably going to be a combination of those two. Um, so Udemy just, there's such a strong expectation of that price point that you're really like, I've published a course or two that was $200, and I think like two people bought it. So it was a very niche course. It was on e-ink and sort of the state of the art of e-ink, and some of my research on that. But it's just it's a very different world. So it's like artists, like they're making 2 pennies per, or like a fraction of a penny per time their song is streamed. So it's just a very different model.
Yeah, I know. I started on Skillshare, so I know what you mean.
Yeah.
What you mean. How did you, let's see. I really love, like, the thing that you said I really love is that you consider creating and publishing courses as part of your learning process. Like, it's
Right.
not like, I think people think like, oh, let me gain this lifetime of experience in one thing, and then
Yeah.
sometime decades from now, I'll have a course when I'm, the world's top authority. But I totally think like you. It's like I'm learning, 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 and then at the end, it's almost like a course just pops out. Like I spin it off
Yeah.
as a byproduct of my learning. Can you say more about like how did you come to that mindset?
Yeah. I've always been interested in how things work, and I've had a lot of different interests. So I needed to create a system that would keep track of all these different learning projects. And so right now I have over 2,000 learning projects. Obviously, most of those are like empty folders. Like it's someday I want to learn about that. Or if I find an article on some blog or a newspaper, I need to have a place to put it. So it's like, or I find a person. So my system, and I don't know if you want to share screens. I actually prepared some stuff to
I'd
like,
love that. Definitely. Yeah.
so, uh, is that showing up?
Yeah.
All right. So my most recent big course is Mastering Planning version 2.0. And I took something, the information organization skeleton. This is basically a taxonomy to organize your whole life, and it's folders and then subfolders. So this is like your work, innovation, marketing, and so it's split into like multiple levels. Personal is here. You have the various aspects of running a household, and so education falls under here under intellectual property. And so there's a way of numbering all your learning projects to fit within there. And so I use a four digit numbering system. No, that's something else. So I
How,
use a four. Yeah.
how does that work? What's the four numbers?
So it's just a 4 digit number, anything from 0001 to 9999. So you have 10,000 numbers there. And it's kind of like the Dewey Decimal System in that you're splitting things up and assigning a number to each learning project. and then they always stay in the same order. So I think of it kind of like pouring concrete. Once you set that number is never going to change. Whereas if you have, and you'll see in my systems, I number pretty much everything with a prefix. And what that does is it makes sure that if you add something new, you haven't organized it yet, it's not going to have that prefix. So you know it's not organized yet. So you can see even in this folder, there's 5, 6 things at the bottom without numbers. And I know those things are not part of the original system. They're new things that I've added. So like for me, 0001 through 0999 is when I just got started and I had no organization. Then I set it up so that all the 1000s are business and professional skills, all the 2000s are personal skills, all the 3000s are relationship skills, all the 4000s are health skills. And these all match up with the numbering system I was showing you earlier, where you're organizing your life based off of 1 is work, 2 is personal, 3 is relationships, 4 is health. Those are I call them the big 4. And then there's some other things here. But yeah, so 0448 I was showing you earlier, that's education. So the 40s are in managing your intellectual property. And so I'm modeling education as a type of intellectual property accumulation. And then within that, the third level subfolder is number 10. There's some other ones like managing your K through 12, your college, your postgraduate. So number 10 is your own personal projects. And then I have some examples here. So, and then from 5,000 through 9,999 is people. So various role models. And I'm big on studying people, having role models. Not necessarily you model your whole life after them, but if they have a specific skill, created a certain business you like, just little things. Anybody who seems interesting to you in any way, you just create a number for them. And now anytime you want to store something about that person, you put it there.
Interesting. So you really are creating like a Dewey Decimal System for your life.
Yeah.
And so do you use a note-taking app at all, or only Google Docs or Google Drive?
Yeah, I use OneNote and Evernote. So I don't really use, I'm in the process of figuring out creating templates. So a lot of people use Evernote. So my part of how I organize or create these systems is they need to be platform independent. So
Totally.
I do a lot of work on paper and pencil, paper and pen. So it needs to work. Actually, there's a good model here. So the way that I model information is this box right here, which is your knowledge management system right here on the left side. So you have the physical manifestation, you have the digital manifestation, and then the mental or cognitive manifestation of information. And then within that, you have your learning projects. So that's where I was showing you earlier, your learning projects are just a subfolder of a subfolder. They're in your part of your personal life, and then they're part of your intellectual property, and then they're part of your education.
Interesting. I love intellectual property accumulation as a euphemism for learning. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like people think of learning as this, like, I'm sure you noticed this, like this ephemeral, ethereal, just like mysterious thing that happens in their head. When actually it's an accumulation. Like you're accumulating assets, you're accumulating tangible resources.
Yeah, and if you're not writing it down, it can seem like it's just one ear out the other. But this is a key part of my story, is that when I was in high school, I was a pretty good student. And the reason why I was good is because I figured out this game of you cram for the test, you get really good at cramming, you stay up till 5 a.m., then you take the test at 10 a.m., then you basically sleep the rest of the day of school, and then you go home and you sleep some more. And then it's obviously very unhealthy, but you can get really good grades doing that. And a lot of people do that. Sometimes in college they burn out, or it's just not possible, or they go on to something else. But if you're a lifelong learner, like I had to learn business, and so I can't just learn it, pass a test, and then forget it. You have to retain it for the rest of your life. So you're playing a completely different game. It's like a 100-yard dash versus a marathon, and you have to switch modes. And for most people, that just never happens.
Right. Yeah, totally. Interesting. So you kind of had this attitude of hacking the system from quite young.
Yeah, and I think that's what strategy is. Like from a game theoretic perspective, you want to understand how does this system work, and then what are the various strategies different people are using, and then which strategy is going to work for me. So there's multiple ways to navigate the system. Each one of those is a strategy, and then what are my strengths and weaknesses, and how can I apply that to the game that I'm playing? And then sometimes it's, well, maybe I should just play a different game. So should I go and play the college game, or should I go out and start my own business game?
Totally. I love that framing because it really is your choice, right?
Yeah.
It's like your choice of which games to play.
Yeah.
Society has their idea of which games you should play, but you know, huh? How did you it takes a number of different kinds of skills to produce online courses. Like you have slides, so graphic design, you do video, probably audio, probably
Yep.
some technical, like there's always technical things with producing content and websites. How did you learn all those sort of creative production skills?
Excuse me. Back in high school, I got into videos and making videos, and so I had that pretty early, and then editing, and then the audio. You sort of have to learn that eventually if you're making video, and but the cool thing is, like, I record all my courses on an iPhone.
Really?
So, I mean, so most of my courses are filmed with this overhead system where you're just seeing me draw on a piece of paper. And then, like, this mastering planning version 2.0, this is what I'm moving towards for my higher quality courses, of making them look better. But it's a trade-off of how much time it takes me to create all this stuff. So, uh, so yeah, I have and I teach, well, I actually have a Udemy course where I teach this, and it's like a tripod. It holds the phone like this, and the iPhone is really good at noise cancellation and stuff. So I really have to do almost no post, just chop them up.
Incredible. So you're completely self-taught. You just learned from what
Yeah.
other online courses or just trial and error?
I mean, most online courses are present PowerPoints, and the thing is, I'm not a great artist, but I do try to visualize ideas to understand them myself. So it's a pretty cheap way for me to translate my visualization, my visual understanding. Like I just released a course called Music Deconstructed, and I show these three-dimensional visualizations of music. It's and there's this idea that music can be a song can be modeled as a torus, which is a donut shape, and then you have a spiral going around that donut, like a ribbon going around the donut. And so that would be very difficult. Like I'd have to use some kind of three-dimensional modeling, Maya or something, to model that, and I don't really know how to do that anyway. So I can draw that, but I can't create a digital thing easily. So I can do it a lot faster, and some people like it. So some people like watching me draw as I talk and write things as I talk. Some people don't, and I think it does the job. So it's a balance.
Yeah, totally. And how long does it take? Like, what's your timeline that you set for yourself to create a new course?
Uh, I don't really work that way. So it's funny because my planning system that I teach is very detailed down to the hour of, and then all the way up to planning your whole life as well as generations beyond yourself. So it's it goes from hour, day, week, month, quarter, year, and then 5, 10, 20, 50, and 100 years, and then you can go beyond that. But how I do things is I like to have tons of free time. Um, like Cal Newport, he wrote that book Deep Work, and that was really influential on me. This idea that you give yourself a lot of free time, and then you just allow yourself to go. And for me, the most important thing is maintaining high motivation and being in the flow. So my goal is to pretty much optimize how much time I spend each day in the flow. And I'm consistently spending 80, 90% plus of my day in the flow. The downside of that is like I just courses randomly, like I get bored. I had spent like 3 months really studying music theory and dance. And eventually I just got bored of the music stuff. So I said, like, I've got about a week left of motivation. I'm going to get this course out. And I just boxed everything up. And I don't know when I'm going to go back to it. So Arnold Schwarzenegger is an interesting example of somebody when he was governor of California. And I think even before that, he had this thing where he didn't make plans with anybody. Like you couldn't schedule something for next week. You had to show up at his office, or like it gave him this agility that's very rare for an executive at that level or at any level. And I also, at a pretty young age, I had this spiritual mentor who was a carpenter, is a carpenter, and that's how he ran his business. He was like an independent, I don't know if contractor or just sort of carpenter, but he told me like, yeah, I just don't plan anything. So I thought I really didn't believe him. And he said, yeah, it's possible. And I do it. And so it works very well. And so much of product. So here's another thing. I'd like to know your thoughts on this. I think there's two kinds of people in productivity. I think there's people who are fundamentally unhappy with the direction or course of their life. And so they're telling themselves, I want to be more productive, but they're actually doing it because they hate their job. They hate a lot of stuff they have to do, and they want to spend less time doing it and free up some time. Then there's people who are really enjoying their life, and they just want, like, they're on the top of their game sort of already, and they want to get even better. And a lot of people, like, we're talking about medicine. I'm coaching some medical school students and creating a course for medical school and nursing and other medical professionals. We got to a point in the coaching where I basically helped him level up in all the accelerated learning stuff he needed. And there was still something off with the motivation. I asked him, like, something seems missing here. Like, why do you even want to become a doctor? And then that led to, oh, well, I sort of decided when I was in high school and blah, blah. Like, there wasn't this burning passion. Whereas with another client that I have, she has that. Like, it's there 110%. So I think a lot of people, they're unhappy with their life. They want to spend less time. They want the tips and tricks, and they end up procrastinating on what they should be doing to go learn productivity tricks, but they never know, are my systems good enough? Do I know enough productivity that I can stop doing the meta work of productivity and get back down to the real work? And unless you do have that systematic understanding of productivity, you never know when that tipping point should occur. And this is known as the explore versus exploit problem in game theory and I think AI maybe, of when do you stop exploring and actually decide, okay, this is the pair of shoes I'm going to buy, or I want this pair of shoes, where can I get a better price? You could spend your whole life looking for a better price for that shoe, but at some point, you that tipping point is, okay, I'm just going to buy it here and move on with my life.
Totally. Yeah, I see that too. I see a similar pattern. It's like, yeah, it's like, I mean, I always say that productivity is the best procrastination tool.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the sort of industry of online articles on productivity, like they're essentially for people who are procrastinating at work but want to do something that doesn't feel like procrastination.
yeah.
It's true. Yeah, you can build systems and design plans and create strategic goals and visions, all these things as a way of just doing the thing that you know you need to do, or alternatively, like you said, as a way of sort of avoiding the hard decision or avoiding looking at what's going on behind the scenes.
There's also a conflict of interest where, as a productivity teacher, I want people to buy more of my stuff. And so there's a conflict of your, and it happens in coaching as well. Do I keep on coaching this person? Do I hold back information? Or does there come to a point where I say, okay, go fly?
Yeah.
So with courses, it's always like, well, I want you to buy one more course and then one more course. So it's tough. Like, and this actually happens in a lot of, I talk about this in my All Experts Are Liars course and also my Win at Getting Coaching courses. There are these really important conflicts of interest between a teacher and a student, and you have to understand those and navigate that. And with my clients, I tell anytime there's a potential conflict, I tell them that up front, and that's just most people don't do that, and it's really key to understanding, well, why is a university set up the way it is? Why is K through 12 set up? You know, whose interests are really at heart here, and are we measuring the right things? Are we improving the right things? And you can trace back a lot of these problems to there's a conflict of interest and that hasn't been solved.
Wow. Yeah, that's intense. That's true. That's really true. How many of your, so you have a coaching business. Are those often students who take your course and then they hire you for coaching?
Yeah, yeah.
What are the numbers like? How many students have you had total? And do you have at any given time? And how does that look like?
I don't talk about numbers on that, so I wouldn't really
Um,
want to get into that. But it is part of what I do with the coaching is also, as my rates have gone up, it's tended to select for a very narrow band of people, and so that can influence. And this is another conflict of interest. As a teacher, do you go after those high income people who can bring in a lot of money, or do you teach things towards people who aren't going to be able to afford as much? And some client has their assistant create a spreadsheet that probably took 5-10 hours, who knows. They have all sorts of things. So if most people don't have a personal assistant to go create spreadsheets for them, is that really transferable to the average person taking my courses? So I do have clients that I either coach for free or do reduced rate, sort of a sliding scale based on what they can afford. And that also helps me get people from other countries, other cultures. And it gives me a window into how different people live. And then I can make sure my system is going to work. I was actually reading a book about hunter-gatherers last week, and it was this theory that scientific thinking came out of hunting, and then mostly hunting. I think it's a combination of both hunting and gathering. Gathering was not just for food, but also the medical properties of various plants. And And I think the combination of experimenting how different plants work medicinally as well as just for food. And then the hunting side is you have to come up with a hypothesis of, based off these tracks I see in the ground, what animal was that? Where was it going? What direction? How big of an animal was it? And then go track that animal down. So ideally, I want to have a system that works for people across the whole spectrum. And so you can see that I try to be very exhaustive with all the different categories, kind of like a Dewey Decimal System. You're trying to really capture all the different categories. And where that's useful also is in your creativity. You don't want to have blind spots. You want to understand all the different domains of knowledge. And then you want to be able to take bits and pieces, and that's what helps you come up with those new ideas.
Very interesting. Wow. I mean, isn't the solution to different sort of like what people can afford just to have different price points? Just to have like cheap courses and ebooks and then like medium ones and then premium coaching? Or do you think it's more complicated than that?
Yeah, I think it's a lot more complicated than that, because you've got people are not going to buy the more expensive version of something if there's something a tenth of the price that fundamentally has the same content. It's very difficult to do that. One way people do it is they'll put it in a book and charge less for the book. And a lot of people don't like to read books, and so they just won't read it, even though it's packed with valuable information. So people use heuristics like, oh, well, a book costs $10, so it must not be worth $100,000 over the course of my lifetime to have that knowledge. But maybe it is. So they're not, and this is a key, I think, innovation in my learning system. And it's the first course in the Endgame Learning the Hard Way series called Skill Investing. So it's this idea that
did you accidentally summon me?
I put the phone on Do Not Disturb. Sorry, what was I saying?
The first course in your endgame system?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so skill investing, you have to think of it like a financial portfolio of stocks. How much time and how much money goes into each of these learning projects? What is the outcome? What is the monetary value of that outcome, as well as the other things? But especially for your career, you're thinking about it in terms of, well, how much, like I just had a client tell me she got a raise for $15,000 this year, and she attributed some of that to our coaching. So that's going to pay for a lot of her coaching, and that's going to carry over for the rest of her life. So if you're getting coaching and it pays for itself after the first year, and then you get that benefit for the rest of your life, and you've got decades more to go, then that's, over 10 years, that's 150,000. Over 20 years, that's 300,000. You're getting close to $500,000. And that's, that's an example of an investment. So you have to be very strategic about, and you have people going through college and they're told just get a college degree. And the reality is, unless you have a degree in a few select areas, it's not going to be easy to get a job. And you just shouldn't be making those decisions, but people are making those decisions because they're not thinking about it as an investment.
So for your 2000 learning projects,
Yeah.
are all of those or many of those skill investments? Do you consider those skill investments?
Yeah, I use that thinking for everything. It's just in terms of what are the other variables you should use beyond money. So you can use time saved, and you can convert between time and money based on what you make per hour, or some type of something like that. A good example is in the legal field. So the way you compensate somebody who isn't able to work anymore is the company, if they, let's say, get injured on the job, the insurance company or the company that hired them has to pay what they would have made during their working life. It's hard to say, well, okay, what are the other costs that you factor in of breaking your leg or being in a wheelchair or something. But that's how they turn it into a financial settlement. So obviously it's not perfect to just use time and money, but how much is it worth to spend an hour a day more with your family or your kids? How much more is it to, just enjoy your life more? I mean, these systems, ideally you install these systems and then a year or two later, you're just enjoying your life and you just have more free time and you're spending more time in the flow. It's hard for me to say, what is it worth to have another hour per day in the flow versus not in the flow? So you get into subjective well-being and other measures that are subjective. So you can look at how this is something I'm learning about right now. You can look at how nonprofits measure the impact they have. They need to have metrics, but it's obviously not just putting money in people's bank accounts.
How do you, I really like this way of thinking. It's almost like learning is sort of like agriculture. It's like
Yeah.
you have a farm. It's like your time is the plot of land you have, and you have to
Yep.
decide what plants to grow, how much of the land to dedicate to each plant. Also taking into account when they yield, how long it takes for them to grow, how much fertilizer it takes. It's like instead of just trying to learn as much as you can in all directions, you are cultivating resources to
Yeah.
reach certain actually, is it though? Is it to reach certain end goals? I feel like you either must have a ton of goals or
Mhm.
have pretty open-ended goals to be able to pursue so many learning topics.
Yeah, I want to show you one thing on the screen share. This calendar. So this is a template. It's shared calendars you get with. It's a set of shared calendars you get here on the left-hand side in the course, and basically I give you an example calendar. So this is just, excuse me, what somebody's day might look like, but you have it's like a spreadsheet. You have the vertical axis is the hours, the horizontal axis is the days of the week, and so you have 168 hours, and it's like 168 acres of property, and how are you going to harvest each of those plots? And so what I get all my coaching clients to do when we're doing planning stuff is you need to record what you actually do each day for a week, and then we're going to look at that and we're going to optimize it. So you shouldn't be eating especially if you need to be very structured. Like these medical school clients, they need to eke out every hour of the day for studying or doing other things. They just work crazy hours. And so, but I don't say you have to record all of your time for the rest of your life, but what I do say is you need to record your time so that I think it takes this much time, and then you need to get that feedback loop of that's how long it actually took. And you need to get into rhythm. So this idea of music, what does an hour feel like? What does 2 hours feel like? If you consistently work in an hour or in a 2 hour or in a 90-minute, you get a sense of, okay, this is what I can get done in this amount of time. That makes it a lot easier to plan. And you also, this is a computer science thing of computational complexity. So you need to turn any problem that you want to be able to do with your human brain. To do it quickly and not get stressed out, it needs to be computationally simple enough that you can run it on the very few cycles you have. And so if you have slots of time, and it's just a question of, does it go into slot number 1, deep work 2, or learning and relax, 1 hour walk. There's a couple things you might be able to shift around, but you only have 3 or 4 options versus infinite options. I could do it any time today. So that's, but there was something else. There was another part of what you said I'm blanking on. I wanted to get to
Goals.
farming. Oh yeah, having a lot of goals. So I look at it kind of like the hierarchy of Maslow's needs. You get those lower needs taken care of, and then at the top, you just play. Life is just play. You're just going around. That was one of the interesting things about this hunter-gatherer book, is they talked about how the children develop their skills over time and why, as adults, they enjoy their work. So part of it is they're not working 40 hours a week. Another part of it is obviously very stable, but they learn as children with little toys like, okay, this is a stick might be an animal, and they might pretend to chase it or hunt it or chase each other. And so as they grow older, like their toys from a young age are the things that are going to prepare them for what they're doing as an adult. Whereas what we have is you do random stuff, you play sports, you do various clubs, extracurricular, and then you go to college and it's like, oh, now I'm going to be a computer scientist. And that's a left turn from what you've been doing. Unless you've been a computer, wizard throughout middle school and high school and done, programming and played around with robots. So there's that preparation and starting it as a game, and it never really stops becoming a game. It's play and it's fun. So that's my ideal, and that's where intuition comes into play, where I'm not sure what my goal is. I'm not sure why this is interesting to me, but I know I'm interested in it. I know I'm motivated to do it, and so I just let myself go and see where it takes me. And then obviously at a certain point, I need to shut certain things down or take a break. Sometimes I'm not bored and not fully finished. Like this mastering planning, I needed to get it out by the end of 2018 so people could use it to plan out 2019. So I cut a few corners to make sure it got out by the end of the year. And it was actually a couple weeks late. But that's, so sometimes practicalities come into it, but I try to, I think of myself kind of like a surfer. I'm just surfing and just seeing where the waves are.
So you just mentioned when you get bored or you lose energy or you lose motivation, and you mentioned before with your music course, how you boxed it up. What does it look like? What is that boxing archiving? I assume you do it so that you can pick it up later if you need to. What does that look like?
So it's a combination of file cabinets, bookshelves, banker's boxes, which are like temporary, and then they can be permanent. So I just published my advanced storage, or my storage core. So what does it look like? So my mastering organization course breaks it down into, you have intellectual property or symbolic property, and then you have physical property. And you need to manage both of those. The tricky thing about symbolic property is it can be physical or digital. So a book or a DVD or a binder or printed out paper is physical, yet it's fundamentally a symbolic object. And so it can be a little bit confusing, but that's what's good about this numbering system is if you have a learning project and it's stuff that's printed out in your file cabinet, all the folders have a heading on it and it has a number, and everything is in numerical order. And then in your computer, everything is in folders and those are sorted by number. And you actually start memorizing the numbers of the things you use most often. And it's a way of structuring your mind. So the Eisenhower interstate system was a huge innovation in terms of the infrastructure of the United States, the highway system, the interstate highways. That really increased trade and travel between cities and parts of the country. And people should have, and this is how I think about it, they should have similar sorts of connections or interstates between different parts of their brain, the different things they're interested in. I talk about in my creative genius course, I think Plato said that the mastery of metaphor is the key to genius or something like that. And so that's seeing similarities amongst different things. And the way you do that is you do have to build that neural connection between different parts of the brain. And you can think of that as an interstate. So by structuring these things and having a taxonomy, it allows you to make connections, and everything isn't just like a blob floating around. they are in different places, but it eventually becomes second nature to know where things belong. And
I love
it's
that.
very peaceful. It's very peaceful to just know where everything is, where it should go. And you put it there 2 years ago and it's still there.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. Timothy, we're just about at the end of the hour.
Yeah.
If my audience wants to take one of your courses, like based on what you know of me, you said you've checked out my newsletter,
Yeah.
what would be the one course or series of courses that you would recommend they get started with?
So it's really, I think of it as the trifecta. The accelerated learning is end game, or learning the hard way. I changed the name for the bundle. So the bundle is all 8 courses, now 9 courses in a single course, and that's called end game. Then there's mastering planning version 2.0. So if you want to improve your planning, that's what you do. And then organization is mastering organization. And the thing about mastering planning is it actually is organizing. It's just you're organizing your time instead of your physical or digital or cognitive objects, ideas. So I think it comes down to which of those do you think has the most issues. I think your audience probably already likes your way of organizing things. So you should keep that and then use my mastering planning system to, I don't know, do you teach planning stuff? I'm not sure how much planning stuff you teach.
No, not really.
Okay. So the planning is there, and one of the key improvements is, I actually want to show, so this right here is the Pamela planning system. Pamela stands for Plan, Act, Measure, Learn. And I would probably start here because this is the only course that's version 2.0 that's got the more mature thing, and you can see the systems. And you can see here the project management system, the process management system, where you keep your habits and routines, and then your task management system, which is to-dos. And those all sort of work together. You can see here how projects, tasks, and processes fit together. So I would probably start there, and then if you are interested in accelerated learning, then get into that. But everybody needs to plan. I think that's probably where people can improve the most. So I would start there and then see what else catches your eye.
Okay. Can you send me links to those two and I'll add them to the show notes?
Yeah. And also on the homepage of my website, I just added this, timothykenny.com. There's a slideshow right here that shows you how all the different courses are organized.
Oh, perfect.
You get a spreadsheet of, so like I created a numbering system for all the different courses. That's Endgame, and then there's the spreadsheet. So that would probably be the easiest way. But yeah, I'll send you links for that stuff too.
Perfect. Timothy, thank you so much. Really fascinating. Your wealth of learning as a parent. Do you have an analogy or an example or a statistic just at arm's length at all times, or mind's length, whatever you would call that? So I think this is a really interesting way of thinking about planning and learning. And I'm super curious to just get this on the blog and see what my followers think. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And I'll talk to you later.
Yeah. Talk to you later.
Bye, Timothy.
See you.